catch them up.
So
15?
We have about 15 participants on right now. Yep.
Okay. Is Dr. Mark Doggett?
yes.
Yep. I see Mark.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
Mark. Okay. Okay. Good. Good.
So
Eating lunch, so I didn't want you to watch me eat.
Oh, I have, okay. Have a nice lunch. You are an hour behind of us, so it is actually 2 p.m. Is it 2 p.m. lunch?
Yeah, it's late lunch for me.
Late lunch.
So if people who don't know me, my name's Caitlin, and I'm the Director of Accreditation for ATMAE. And typically our site visits for accreditation take place in the spring. And we got one visit that actually took place where people actually got to go to campus this spring before the whole COVID pandemic shut down most of the campuses and before it canceled a lot of our in-person visits. So what we've been doing for a lot of our site visits is we've been having virtual site visits and working with the institutions with the technology they have and the technology ATMAE has to still do as much of the site visit as possible, but virtually. The teams are still meeting, going over the self-study report, communicating with the contact person. We've done everything from virtual lab tours, exit interviews are being taken place over Zoom or whichever platform each institution chooses to use, interviewing the various people that need to be interviewed. And I haven't had a lot of teams who've told me, okay, we can't do this. And a lot of teams and institutions are working hand in hand because we're all kind of in this together trying to figure out the best course of action to follow so that we can still get the site visits taken place so the institutions can remain accredited. And even though this pandemic is happening. I know Dr. Zagari, you've been a team chair for a few visits during this pandemic. Is there any insight you want to talk about or anything like that you've had to deal with these visits?
Yes, I'm not used to going first. My last name is Z, so I'm the last always. I think that this is once in a century event, and considering that we're hoping that this is rare in the future and not happen in the next century too, maybe. So we caught into an unprecedented, unexpected emergency situation. So we had two choices, two bad choices. One choice was to postpone everything, to grant accreditation for one more year and wait for next year. The other one was that use technology and do everything we could to make our visit as closest to reality as it could, knowing that engineering programs or engineering related programs are relying on the face-to-face, on the hands-on. When you talk about safety, one of your standards, that safety cannot be verified unless you are there. Video and all of those things are good, but so in the emergency situation, we managed to do the visits, and the institutions have been very cooperative, have done everything they could. When the team chair requested a virtual tour of the laboratories, then happened. But it has been a successful emergency situation that will never happen again, but we don't know that. So therefore we have to prepare more for the future too. So with that in mind, when the board approved that, the virtual, then we had Mark, he replied back and he said, how can I do it without the visit? And he was correct. He was very right. He tried, and actually he is the chair of the team, visited our institution, and he did very close to what can happen. With all of that, we managed it. I hope that the institution representatives also are among us so that they can reflect, they can have feedback to us. But my experience is that nothing replaces the face-to-face work. And therefore, when my team member told me that is standard, I have to be there to say something, therefore I don't know what to say. So we had to go back and say, try. So by trying to do the best we could, we managed it. And actually, I have been in touch with you and then with the other team members who visit places. It was, we did it. I cannot say mission accomplished, but I can say we did it. And we could do, in an emergency situation like this one, can we do more? Can we do better? Can we be prepared? Yes. But in the real life, I don't recommend it. For many of our standards, I don't recommend it. So that was my experience with that. I will be happy to listen now from now until there is a question. Okay, thank you.
Does anybody who's currently on this webinar have any feedback? Have their institution been visited? Have they been part of a team? Does anybody have any questions in regard to the difference between the virtual visits and accreditation and how it would normally go?
Probably I can share my experience in teaching online. I taught online courses in the.
What should they ask for at work? What should?
Can you hear me? Can you?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
That has not been posted.
Oh, some other noise coming there?
That is a Zoom.
Oh.
Don't worry. There's Zoom hacking. You remember
Okay.
that? You read the article about Zoom hackers in the Zoom. So that's it. We hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I taught online courses in the past also, but now I think things have changed. Now we have better tools like Collaborate and Zoom that we can share our screen, we can record videos, and students can go back and look at our demo, our lectures again. But I totally agree with Dr. Zargari, because I ask our students also, what do you like? What do you prefer, online or face-to-face? So they almost all of them, they said that we like face-to-face then. So I think this is, I mean, for the alternate, I mean, this was kind of an option for us, you know. So for the alternate strategy, this is fine to have online. But I think it's not like 100% perfect like face-to-face. In face-to-face, we have other choices also. We can teach in class and ask questions face-to-face, and also we can incorporate Zoom, Collaborate, or Blackboard while having face-to-face courses. So it gives us more choices. And especially regarding undergraduate students, undergraduate courses, I think face-to-face is better. For more mature, non-traditional students, for graduate programs, I think online is okay. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
And I did want to just bring up that I have had a few institutions reach out to me and say that because they are doing predominantly online teaching right now, that their grading scale has changed to satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and if that will affect ATMAE accreditation. While ATMAE requires that we see graded work, we don't require that we don't dictate your grading scale. So that is a perfectly fine grading scale as long as you can show examples of graded work and that sort of thing and graduates from the program. So that's totally up to an institution what grading scale you use for each program.
I have a question. This is Hisham Lawrence at University of Texas at Tyler. Because of the COVID pandemic, some institutions are having some financial constraints, and they're facing hiring freezes. How are you guys going to interpret the ratio of students to faculty when it comes to doing your accreditation when a university is maybe on a hiring freeze?
Hisham?
Yes, sir.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm well, Dr. Zagar. How are you?
Good. This is a very good question. We don't really look at the high ratio because the question you have relates to if the classes become bigger in size, more students. If that is the case, as long as the class and the students are getting the skills that they need, especially in the lab classes that is limited to the equipment. So we don't really have a number. We don't have a number. We don't have a ratio. We look at it as a class size and the number of the equipment available. And the ratio is not a given number in that. Knowing that the institutions do not hire new faculty, that is an inside institutional issue. We don't interfere with the institutional issue as long as the classes are conducted right and the student get in a sequence that is a sequence that they have already managed to have it, the courses, and graduate within 120 hours, we will be fine. We don't question the ratio, especially if it's higher. If a ratio is very low and you have a faculty with 2 students, that is also institutional problem. That may be a question. I have never in the past written a statement that the class ratio was too high, if that is the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
On that same line, with everything being a little different this semester, our surveys, especially employment surveys, will be running way behind if we do them at all this year because of everything else going on. How should we document that?
The surveys that Marvin, is Dr. Marvin, Dr. Sarapin there? Okay, the surveys that you are speaking for this year, you have surveyed employers of this year, which you will report, because the surveys, depending on what they are. If they are employer surveys, we want 3 to 5 years. You have already, the institution has already submitted for this year their surveys and everything. So they have 6 more years or 4 to 6 more years to do that, unless they had a partial. If they had a partial, then you are talking about 2 years. So the report and visiting team who audit the institution and the report know the circumstances that we are facing now. Well, every 3 to 5 years is a good range that we have. So you could even wait for next year to survey them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Caitlin. I have a question. This is Yu. I have a question about the deadline. And, I'm currently finalizing a visit. And since it took longer for the university to send me, let's see, they recorded the virtual lab tours that I also managed to meet their board members, some students online. So it took longer. So is there a specific deadline we need to meet? And also there's another visit I was assigned to. I never heard from that institution. I never got their self-study report.
Well, you had a, sorry, Caitlin, let me, you have a visit that you never received self-study for it?
Yeah.
Did you contact Caitlin? We don't want to mention the name.
I did. I emailed Caitlin.
Okay.
I also emailed the contact person. She said she's still working on it, but I haven't heard from her for a long time, since March, the end of March.
Okay. So that's something that I will ask Caitlin later on. I will call her tomorrow. So the deadline, Caitlin has a deadline. If the institution receives, they have a question or they want to have a report, is it 60 days prior to the meeting? So, and the deadline for you to report is 45 days after you visited the institution. So do you think that you need more than 45 days? Caitlin, you have the standard before you. We have 45 days.
So how do we define the visit? So
because
date we
we're not
received
actually going on campus and how it traditionally is done. I just recommend that you get the report to the institution, copy me on it within 45 days of completion of doing the site visit, the virtual site visit, because I know you can't do it streamlined like we normally would do. You get there, you have one full day of visits, and then you have another maybe half day of visits and an exit interview.
Yeah.
So if you can work with the institution, because we do know there's a lot of
I think we already got all the requested documents and we are finalizing it. It's almost, I think, a little bit more than 30 days probably from the date that I received their report.
And that's good, because we do know that doing the virtual site visits is definitely not the norm that we're used to. So it's a little bit of a learning curve for everybody. So as long as institutions and the teams are working together, it's our goal to make sure that, you know, teams are getting the support that they need and institutions have the support they need to get and exchange the information. Because like Dr. Zagari referenced before, this is like an unprecedented situation. So yes, we're trying to adhere as closely as possible to those timelines and those deadlines. But I know that some institutions have reached out and said, hi, all this other stuff has been dumped on me. I'm trying to get this out. So I just request that they get it to us as soon as possible. And I'll take a look at my list, Dr. Yu, and follow up with any institutions that you're also on the site visit team.
Okay, yeah, I just want to let you know,
Thank you.
So I have a question. I think Dr. Yu and I are in the same team to visit Kent State University.
Yeah.
So is there still on?
I haven't got their self-study report.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Jim, are you recording? Are we recording this?
Yes, we're recording this. Sorry.
Okay.
I was muted.
Please try to not mention the name of the university. We don't want that. So you were visiting one university, and from that, Caitlin, she will follow up with them.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions about specific visits or how their institution's impacted or anything along those lines? So,
hey, Lynn, I'd just say that it's from working. I mean, we never shut down, so I'm still working 50 hours a day. I'm not going to do any virtual site visits again, because you can't. If I go away for 2 days or 3 days, I can do it, but dragging on and on and on, waiting for responses from professors that, you know, that I've never met, and then coordinating everything via emails, it's just too much work.
I've heard other people express that as well, Steve.
Yeah, I completely agree with that statement, in that my experience, this is Marvin, it's probably taken me 10 times longer to do the 2 visits that I've done because of that. Yeah, but this is an emergency. I don't suspect we would do it in the future. But what would we do in the future if you have a team member or a team chair who says, I don't have the time to devote to finishing this? I think that person should report that to the executive director and perhaps be replaced on the team.
Marvin, by executive director, you meant the BOA, the accreditation director.
Yes.
So you upgraded
exactly.
Today to executive.
The accreditation director. Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Sure.
You know, and I also want to review that on March 12th, the board approved, and then Caitlin sent down to all team chairs a 7-step process to follow for these special instructions. And I wonder in how many cases people have read that and are sticking to what those 7 steps were. I think the 7 steps were very well thought out and emphasized maximum flexibility so that we could have successful visits. And as a board member, I think we should put it on our next board agenda to actually review how successful the visits have been and what the recommendations how to do this in the future if you have this situation happening again.
Thank you.
Lauren?
Well, I think, yeah, Marvin, I think you're right. I think that, you know, if we had 90 days to plan for this instead of probably 9 days, we could have done it much more effectively. We could have, you know, set the video tours in place that the various schools had to do, and all that could have been, we could have had plenty of time to lay it out for them so that they had to respond in kind like they do in a normal visit. So like you say, this was kind of hopefully a one-of-a-kind deals, and if we ever did it again, you know, hopefully we would have more time to do it. But like I say, my only comment was the same as yours. It just takes way longer doing it this way than when you go and do a site visit and wrap it up.
So hopefully we won't have to do anything like this in the future, and this is a one-off, and hopefully the COVID-19 crisis starts to go away, and our site visits next year will be as per usual and in person, and we can avoid this going forward. I do appreciate all the team chairs, team members, Board of Accreditation members for being as flexible and accommodating with these different visits, because I'm sure the institutions it's a learning, like I keep saying, it's a learning curve for everybody, and trying to figure out the best way to get the information to the team or show them your labs and do the virtual tours has been a little difficult for everybody, especially if you're not even allowed to be on campus. So I appreciate everybody's patience and time and willingness to work with everybody.
Thank you.
I actually have a question along the lines of what you just said about not being on campus. How do we handle if their report, they say it's in a resource room, but now they don't have access to campus to get us that information? How would you like us to handle, I guess, the reporting of that as far as the compliance or not if they can't get to the information?
Same as if they wouldn't provide it any other time. It's a partial compliance. I mean, they have their options to do a 2-year report, or if you think it's not that serious, you could give them accreditation and just make a note of it. I mean, depends on really what you're lacking.
Okay.
Steve is correct. You have choices. You have partial, you have none. So we were a little bit flexible this time because there was a meeting that happened 2 days after the board approval of that 7 steps. So with that meeting that I was involved, it was very little you could do to request for what you mentioned. To request have their resource room available to you via distance virtually. It could happen if we had to do it and we had enough time. So in that case, there could be a range of choices. You know, you could do partial if you believe they have something, but you can see it. You can do none if there is nothing. So there is possible that to search for and rate them based on what you see.
Does anybody else have some questions?
So are we still doing this virtual visit or on campus?
That was one time a century. Hopefully 2 centuries. If we get smarter and get better in the medicine and science, maybe. So it was one time and it was emergency.
So virtual. So is that virtual this time?
This time was virtual, and hopefully next time we will be face to face, unless who knows what next spring. Okay. During if we have to prepare, we have to prepare because the predictions are that maybe maybe COVID-19 is with us for some time. So we have to prepare. I think that Caitlin and Board of Accreditation and we should be prepared. We should prepare ourselves for better.
Yeah.
It's better, but it's not our preference. The virtual, not our preferred auditing.
So has anyone done virtual visit already or?
Oh yeah, I did.
Okay, several. Okay.
Many. Oh, you were in one of the teams. Okay, you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But Caitlin, I think we are almost done, aren't we? In May, we have a couple maybe in May.
So there are some site visits that are still taking place, but this year, of all the site visits we had, I think off the top of my head, we had 24. There was only one that actually took place on campus because it happened so early. It was before all the campuses had shut down. So every other one has been taking place virtually.
I see. Okay. Good. Okay. Thank you.
I just had a question regarding what were the major issues that you had as an accreditation site team that you didn't have access to that really made it difficult for you? Because I know, you know, in student work, I guess they could have taken pictures of all the student work or what have you and sent it to you. But I'm just wondering what were the major issues that made it really difficult for you?
Mark, Dr. Miller.
Yes.
The issue is that, for example, you talk about safety.
Mm-hmm.
Can video a safe environment, but that is video. You need to see a student at work following the safety rules. So there are, from 19 standard that we have, almost 12 of them relate to something that you should see and you should check. Not use even the virtual, virtual reality things are good, but that is virtual. When our, to our institution, our chair, the visiting team chair said, I wish that I would have seen all of those things that you had in the video. I took it as I can't certify, I can't verify, but he did verify. So what I'm saying is that the issues are related to actual lab work, not the lab report or not the documentation. Those things can be done online, but what should be verified by seeing them, it was missing and is missing.
Yeah, I was just curious, and then trying to do the exit interviews with the president or whatever, or even just talking to all the other different administrators. I probably find that difficult. I think just doing it,
you get to take their words. You are not there, so they can say things, but is a part of. The president or provost can read from the report. So the purpose of visit is not that. The purpose of visit is to justify, to verify, to confirm the report is not happening.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because you could just go to another university, and take pictures of all their equipment and labs and all that. So, I was just wondering how that all went.
We had to do it.
So that's really not realistic because we have a history. Many of these programs have been visited before and they'll be visited again. And I find that to be outrageous to think that a school would do that. I think most cases that I've seen, the schools are perfectly willing to try to give the team the information needed. And the one I found most difficult to evaluate was, how do you determine whether a program is well understood? Well, as a chair, you talk to somebody at the institution and you work out a strategy. Do you look at documents? Do you talk to people on the phone? It's our job as chairs to be creative to make sure that we can validate the self-studies.
No, I think that's good. Thanks, Marvin. I just was hoping, the whole intent of accreditation is they're supposed to be there to help you and tell you what what issues you have and the support that you should get from your administration. So,
Oh, absolutely. And we're there to try to help them.
Yes.
You know, that was the biggest problem we had. No one was on campus. So
Right.
you couldn't get a group of students together. You couldn't get a group of advisory people together. The faculty was sheltered at home. The admin was sheltered at home. So you could, you know, you might get 2 or 3 people on a telephone call, but you know, somebody didn't answer their phone, a student or a faculty or whatever. You just weren't.
But the bottom line is we do the best we can to complete the job.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no institution that's going to lose accreditation over this unless they didn't submit a self-study. So, and, you know, we have ongoing processes. Maybe there'll have to be a 2-year follow-up report or whatever. You know, in the history of the board, there's been very, very few cases where we've had a follow-up report and required return visit. Because most cases, you know, those things could be handled with pictures and documentation and the like, you know. So I'd be interested to find out from Caitlin, you know, has there been any chairs that have contacted you and identified that it was difficult in conducting the visit? Or have you been contacted by any schools stating the same?
It's mostly, I have been contacted by a few team members, and usually I'll reach out to the institution and I'll get an answer or try to help the best we can. Of course, I mean, like everyone's aware, everybody's trying to do the best they can at this point, because if your superiors are telling you you can't be on campus, you're doing the best you can to still communicate with team members and the necessary people to get the information to whoever needs it. And I agree that there's no substitution for actually being there in person to see it for yourself, but we're doing the best we can and working with institutions to ensure that, you know, we can still see some of the things and you believe what they're telling you, and that, you know, institutions aren't making stuff up just to continue accreditation. Like you said, Dr. Serapin, we have a history with some institutions and they've had sent previous information, so you have to kind of believe what they're saying.
Caitlin, have you gotten any feedback from CHIA as to what they recommend to do during this virus situation?
Not specifically. I was on a webinar that CHIA provided about what other entities are doing in this, and a lot of entities are basically doing the virtual visit the same way, or similar way that ATMAE is doing it.
Thank you.
I think we're all in the same boat when it comes to that. No one kind of expected something like this to ever happen in their lifetime or ever. So we kind of just have to figure it out as we go along. And I think that document that ATMAE, the Board of Accreditation, put together is really good and has excellent steps and is a great guideline. Some institutions can't necessarily strictly adhere to it because of the limitations they have on campus and that sort of thing, but they're working really hard to make sure that they can fulfill the requirements for ATMAE, get the information to the teams, and vice versa for the teams.
You know,
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Marvin, going back to your conversation about the long history you have, I don't think that our report would have, I don't think the outcome of the report our team, my team did, would have been different. I think perhaps they would have had less partials and more compliance, but I don't think that our recommendation would have been any different because of some of the items that were in question.
Oh, I tend to agree. I think the 2 visits I did, you know, there are going to be a couple of, you know, items that will be disputed, but there'll be many items which will be agreed upon, and there'll be a recommendation for a 2-year progress report.
Right.
Which is appropriate.
And if something happens and campuses are opening back up, maybe in the summertime, if it's applicable, if a team chair needs to go for a 1-day visit or something like that to a campus to check on some things that they just want to make sure of, we can arrange that as well. But we're just still kind of waiting to see what the next steps are and when everything can be opened up and if travel is even going to be permitted over the summer kind of thing. So we do have those.
Well, you're exactly right.
But it's kind of like
actually, item 7 of our procedure says that.
Yes.
I guess I'd like to follow up on what Marvin and Amal were saying in terms of the approach. One of the first comments I made to Marvin when I heard about this is I said, "Oh, great, we've kept all the drudgery work and taken all the fun out of the accreditation visit."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and he agreed with me.
Yeah.
Because of course, looking and evaluating a self-study is, not exactly the greatest work.
Well, that's
but-
exactly right. You don't have the personal contact or the chance to go out for your Japanese food. Yeah.
Right. And
absolutely right.
yes, and the association with colleagues and the breaking of bread and all that kind of stuff is an important part of this process. It really is.
Yeah.
But that said, and I've learned a lot from Marvin in the visits that we've had together. One of the things that was challenging that I saw was just trying to gauge the depth of understanding and or acknowledgement of ATMAE and the involvement of students and the involvement of faculty in the self-study, which of course is one of the standards. And we didn't get, I wasn't able to get, or at least the team was not able to get that depth of understanding in terms of how well the administrators, the students, the board members, those kinds of things, how well they were, how much they were involved with ATMAE, how much they were involved in the process and so forth. So I'd say that's, probably one of the things I'd like to add to that.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you just ask open-ended questions of people and they'll, it gives you an idea of how much they know about the accreditation process and their involvement with it. It gives you a good feel for the institutional support as well as the support of industry.
Thank you, Dr. Doggett. Any additional questions or any feedback anybody wants to give in regard to accreditation?
The only other thing I guess I'd like to add in terms of, it seems like there's several different approaches that have been used this year. One of the things that that I was thinking when they first came out with the guidelines is kind of similar to this process where you would look at the self-study, you would go through this evaluation period, and then you would put together a report. What I was pleasantly surprised with was how we were able to actually replicate much of the actual visit virtually in a short period of time. And so that can be done. It does take, I think, a little bit more work on the institution's part in setting up all these things virtually, which you would do normally with face-to-face meetings. But again, in some cases, this may be a better way to go, particularly if you have people that are traveling or people that are not, on campus all the time. So I see that as maybe a lesson learned for the future in ways that we could maybe do some hybrid version of accreditation with a site visit, but also some enhanced telephone and or teleconferencing capabilities. So I think we should leave that on the table going forward as as an option, even if we're back to normal, whatever normal is.
Well, the board has been asked for years to study ways of alternatives. I can remember 10 years ago where a certain institution wanted to do a completely online virtual, and I think we did one as a trial. But our standards are going to be reviewed, and our processes always change, and that's something to keep in mind as we prepare for the next version of the standards.
So any more questions or feedback or anything along those lines? Someone just reached out and asked me if we're still having the conference in October. And yes, as far as we are doing right now, the conference will still be in October. If anything does change, we'll be sure to let members know what the format will be, if it's changing, dates or anything along those lines. But as of right now, the conference is still taking place in October in Louisville.
Okay.
Mhm. And if that does change and we have to go to virtual, we'll be sure to kind of communicate that to everybody as often as possible and try to make it as streamlined for everybody so that everybody knows kind of what their role is, especially with the hearings and the accreditation workshops and everything along those lines.
Thank you.
Okay, so if nobody has any additional questions or any feedback, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to be on this webinar. I'd like to thank everybody who had some input for this webinar or questions that were asked. Thank you, Dr. Zagari, for being a backup for me.
You're welcome. Kathleen, if you plan for a board accreditation board meeting, after you get all the reports, and after we can have some feedback from maybe the board members and some chairs together, maybe possibly in months, in sometime maybe in July, end of June, so that we can prepare. You're right. We have to think about alternative. What will happen October 7th, so and prepare the same as today. We could prepare for it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, hey, this is Jim. I just wanted to, again, Jim Thompson, the Executive Director for ATMAE, just again wanted to thank you all for taking the time to do this. Just as a follow-up, if you have any additional thoughts on any of the webinars that we've done or any future webinars we might be doing, I think with us using this platform, this is a great way for us to kind of communicate to members and share information and exchange ideas, not only, outside of the conference. So if you have any thoughts or additional ideas, just executive@atmae.org. If you have any thoughts on any other potential programs or services we might be able to offer. And again, hopefully cross your fingers, we will see everybody in October in Louisville.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Caitlin. Thanks, Dr. Zagari.
Thank you.
Caitlin.
Thanks.
Dr. Zagari.
You guys
Thank
all
you.
take care.
Thanks a lot.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see each other.
Thanks, Jim. And Karen.
Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. Caitlin, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Zagari.
See you guys.
Okay. Thank you.